Thank you and welcome to the Stockbridge Selectboard meeting of October 16th, 2025. Pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20F, after notifying the chair of the public body, any person may record or transmit this open meeting. This hybrid meeting is being recorded by the town of Stockbridge. The names of members participating remotely will be announced. Any member of the public wishing to speak must first receive permission from the chair. The agenda items listed are those reasonably anticipated by the chair, but not all may be discussed. And other topics not listed may be brought up for discussion by the public body as permitted by law. So tonight we're going to start with a tax classification hearing, and Michael Blay, our town assessor, is here to give us information. And welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So we're in the process this time of year of setting the first steps in setting the tax rate. And we already had our valuations approved and the sales analysis approved. So the next step is tonight, the tax classification hearing. So I'm just going to go through the information about keeping either a single tax rate or splitting the tax rate between residential class and commercial class, and also the options that are available to the town decided upon by the select board, which is a residential tax exemption or a small commercial exemption. Right now, we are currently estimating a tax rate after all the financials have been put into the gateway system for the DOR of $6.83. This is an estimated overall decrease of 26 cents over last year's tax rate of $7.09 per 1,000 of valuation. The first item in the tax classification is deciding on a residential factor. The select board can decide to shift the tax rate up to 150%. But if you do shift the burden, it must create a residential factor that is no lower than the town's historical factor. There have been expanded minimum residential factor parameters that fall under Chapter 200, Section 12, that allow the maximum commercial, industrial, and personal property shift to go as high as 175% for fiscal year 2026, but there are additional guidelines that pertain to these maximum shifts. That is page 1. The Board of Selectmen also have the option to allow residential exemption. There's actually 3 options: an open space discount and a small commercial exemption. We don't discuss the open space discount because it doesn't pertain to Stockbridge because we don't have an open space class. The residential exemption and the small commercial exemption, I will go over using 2 different options. But first, on page 3, is the tax classification tax allocation for fiscal year 2026. And I'm just going to read off the total valuations that were approved by the Department of Revenue by class. The residential class at the moment, which is certified on our LE4, is $1,361,988,320. Open space again is 0. The commercial class is $70,284,700. The industrial class is $6,725,900. And our personal property total is $56,162,681 for a total valuation of $1,495,161,601. We also have an estimated tax levy of $10,211,953. Now, by keeping a residential factor of 1, which would maintain a single tax rate in the community, the fair and cash value percents are as follows. The residential percent is 91.0931. The commercial class is 4.7008. The industrial percent is 0.4498, and the personal property percentage is 3.7563. That adds up to 100% of market value. That is our fair and full cash value. If you were to decide to vote on a split tax rate, which would bring us to page 5, which are all the options of going beyond a single tax rate. And what this chart basically shows is it starts up, if you look at the first, on this Excel spreadsheet, if you look at the first column, the residential tax exemption that we're forecasting is 683. Every increment of a shift would show you what the tax rate would be between the classes. It would be a separate rate for the commercial, industrial, and personal property, and it would be a separate rate for the residential class. Now, historically, the town of Stockbridge has always had a single tax rate. The reasoning behind that, and I think the major reason behind that, is because after reading off the fair and full cash value percents, the commercial, industrial, and personal property add up to 8.9069%. It's below 10%. There really is no logic in shifting the burden to the commercial, industrial, personal property class when it sits below 10% of the total valuation in town. So the Board of Assessors is recommending that we keep a single tax rate in place. And again, that tax rate is projected to be 683. There is a possibility that that tax rate could change when we present our financials to the Department of Revenue starting tomorrow. It could take about a week before we have a final tax rate. We're looking at maybe a few pennies. If not, it will be the 683. And if you go to page 4, this is a what if scenario worksheet for fiscal year 26. Again, it shows the valuation totals, how much for each class is part of the total overall valuation. Those are the same numbers that I just read. And it also shows the levy again. Now, the tax levy, that is the amount that the town is looking at this moment that we're going to be raising through taxation. That is the total amount, the 10,211,953, using a tax rate of $6.83. So now if we go to page 6, I did 2 examples. We're going to go into the options now. I did 2 examples for the residential exemption using a low of 20%, which is the amount that you can, the minimum amount is 20%. You can go up to 35%. And I'm just going to go through the calculation of the residential exemption using both 20% and 35%. Now, a residential exemption applies to every residential property which is the principal residence of a taxpayer. The residential exemption does not apply to accessory land, incidental to a residential use, second homes, or to a residential property not occupied by its owner. This would also include rental properties. In addition, the application of the exemption may not reduce the taxable value of the property to less than 10% of its full and fair cash value. So for this example, the way that the Department of Revenue lets us calculate this, and these calculations are coming from the gateway system that we plug all of our information to give us these what if scenarios. What you have to do to calculate the average residential value. Now, this is not the average single family value. It's the average residential value using the condominiums, the single families, the land valuations, the mixed use properties. They don't allow you to do it by the single family homes. You have to do it by your total class of value in your residential class. So basically you take the total assessed value, which is, and I initially said it in the review of the LA4, 1,361,988,320, and you divide it by the total residential parcel count. And currently that stands at 1,697 parcels. And what that gives you is an average residential value of 802,586. You then take that amount and you multiply it by the percent. So if you were in favor of the residential exemption of 20%, you would multiply it by the 20%. What that will give you is a residential exemption amount. That would be the amount that comes off of every parcel that qualifies. And that would be 160,517. So what we're calculating, and again, I can't stress enough, this is a very, very rough estimate of 665 parcels out of the 1,697 that would actually qualify. And again, this is what I do is basically a quick search through our database and using the town clerk's information to give a rough idea of how many parcels would be eligible without actually going through an application process. Because there is an application process in place in order to qualify for a residential exemption. It is not an automatic by no means. So basically what this is saying is for every eligible parcel, let's say, for example, your valuation was 500,000, you would get 160,517 off of the valuation before the tax rate is applied. So again, I'm using 665 parcels. If you go to page 7, this is where we, I'll just read this off. The residential exemption, 160,517, is multiplied by the eligible parcels of 665 to determine how much value is taken from the total residential class and dispersed to the second homeowners and renters who would not qualify for the exemption. This number is 106,743,805. What this really means is you're still keeping your total valuations in place. Those are already certified. However, what you're doing, because you're subtracting the 160,000 from each eligible parcel, you still have to make up for that tax levy. So what it basically does is it creates a shift within your valuation class. And let's use 500,000 as an example. Your valuation is still 500,000. You're just basically getting an exemption for that 1 year of the 160,000. But again, that in order to make up for that same tax levy with the reduced valuation, it means that your tax rate has to increase. So if the estimated tax rate of 683 was in place without a residential exemption and without a split tax rate, what that would mean is we would have to recalculate the residential tax rate or the entire tax rate. It would be $7.41 instead of 683. This would be an increase of 58 cents over the rate that is being estimated of 683 for fiscal year 2026. And it would be an overall increase in the tax rate of 32 cents from fiscal year 2025 to fiscal year 2026. And I just want to stress a few points about the residential exemption. Again, it only applies to people that are residents of Stockbridge and who can prove their residency and their domicile. We have yet to set up an exact program for proving that. It's very difficult because there is no rural delivery of mail. So basically using, your parcels to say this is where I live, it would possibly be a utility bill, possibly your taxes. That process has yet to be worked out. But again, this does not apply to renters. It doesn't apply to second homeowners. But those renters and second homeowners would still be not getting the exemption, but also getting a higher tax rate. Everybody would. And it's still possible that an individual's property's tax bill will increase even after the residential exemption if the fiscal year 2026 assessment has increased above the normal percentage increase, or their assessment is at or passes what is considered the breaking point. This is especially true for fiscal year 2026, since the real estate valuations have increased again, and some significantly due to the sales that took place in calendar year 2024, which were mostly higher than the adjusted valuations from fiscal year 2026. And as a side note, there are currently no cities or towns in Western Massachusetts that have adopted a residential exemption. The adoption of this exemption is basically a shift in the tax burden to second homeowners and to property owners who have rental property. It creates an automatic split tax rate in communities that may have no intention of having a separate residential and commercial rate. Now, I did that for the 20%. I'm not going to go through all of the details again for the 35%, but using a higher residential exemption, and currently 35% is the maximum allowable in Massachusetts. They are considering going to a 50% in the future if communities are designated as seasonal communities. That has not been worked out, and I don't believe that there's been a vote on that yet. So for this presentation, I'm just going to go ahead and use 35% as the highest. What that would do is you're still keeping your total assessed valuation. This is page 8. You're still keeping your total residential parcel count, but now your average residential, or you're still keeping, I'm sorry, you're still keeping your average residential value. However, with the 35%, the residential exemption amount increases to $280,905. And now that would mean that would be the amount coming off of every eligible parcel, still using the 665 parcels. If you go to page 9, the amount of valuation, the dispersion of the residential class would be $186,801,825. And again, because you need to make up for this lost value, the tax rate would increase to $7.91 instead of the $6.83 that is projected. And it would be an overall increase in the tax rate of 82 cents from fiscal year 2025 to fiscal year 2026. That is the residential exemption in a nutshell. The other option that you have is what's called a small commercial exemption. The small commercial exemption is one of the 3 options. If adopted, the small commercial, I'm sorry, this is page 10. The small commercial exemption may be up to 10% of the assessed value of each eligible class 3 commercial property. It does not pertain to industrial properties, and it does not pertain to personal property accounts. A small commercial exemption applies to class 3 properties that are occupied by businesses with an average employment of no more than 10 people and an assessed valuation of less than 1 million. A small commercial exemption is not allowed for commercial properties that have any current vacancies. The parcel has to have full capacity as far as rentals. For a business to qualify, the director of the Department of Workforce Development must certify that it had an average annual employment of 10 or fewer people at all locations during the preceding calendar year. A list is provided to the Board of Assessors on an annual basis, and we use that to come up with the projection of how many parcels are eligible. Adopting a small commercial exemption increases the commercial and industrial tax rate. The amount of the tax levy paid by those 2 classes remains the same, but because of the exempted valuation, it is distributed over less assessed value. The higher tax rate creates a shift that reduces the taxes paid by owners of properties occupied by small businesses and shifts them to larger commercial and industrial taxpayers. Now, the calculation for this, again, this is through the Department of Revenue, is you multiply the total value of eligible parcels by the selected commercial exemption percent. So let's say you went with the maximum of 10%. That would be a total value of $343,670 coming off of every eligible commercial property. And the total value to be exempted is subtracted from the total commercial class. And in order for us to apply this exemption, it must be determined which parcels are eligible. I've estimated the eligible parcels to be around 6 parcels. Now, again, what this would create is a new tax rate for the commercial class and the industrial class. This tax rate will be higher than the residential and personal property tax rate. Finally, on page 11, the new commercial and industrial tax rate using the above numbers would be recalculated to $6.86. This would be an increase of 3 cents over the rate that is being estimated at 6.83 for fiscal year 2026. And just a few side notes, the small commercial exemption would have a very small impact on those parcels that are eligible, even using the highest 10% exemption allowed by law. The reduction in taxes does not go back to the small business. It only benefits the owner of the commercial property. And the adoption of the exemption is basically a shift in the tax burden to the larger commercial and industrial properties in town. It creates an automatic split rate in communities that may have no intention of having a separate residential and commercial rate. And I also wanted to mention that the Board of Assessors at their last meeting a couple weeks ago made recommendations for keeping a residential factor of 1 and for not adopting the residential tax exemption or the small commercial exemption. That's all I have.
Good job.
Thank you. Michael.
You're welcome.
So any questions by the board to Michael?
No.
Anyone from the audience have a question or comment? Anyone from Zoom? Seeing none. I'd like to make a motion to adopt the residential factor of 1 to maintain a single tax rate for all classes of property.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. I make a motion to not adopt a residential tax. Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That carries. I make a motion to not adopt a small commercial exemption.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All motions carry. So Michael, thank you, and you can.
Okay,
the
you're
necessary
welcome.
Paperwork.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, and we will be working on a tax rate and we're projecting, because we have been getting phone calls, believe it or not, people wondering where their tax bills are. So those will probably be in the mail. We're hoping in early November.
Okay, is that normalish?
Normalish, yeah. It's earlier than last
I
year.
mean, we have, what's our tax collection rate?
It's
90.
nearly 100. I mean, she's very close. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, so-
Stockbridge is financially, we couldn't be in a better shape.
That's true. Yep.
And people know that.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
All right.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you,
Michael.
Okay. You too.
All right. Public comment. This is an opportunity for the select board to listen to residents, property owners, and business owners. Topics of particular concern or importance may be placed on a future agenda. Each speaker will be limited to 2 minutes. Total time will be 10 minutes that may be extended by the chair. Any comments from the room? Seeing none. Zoom, I see one. Hold on. I need a time. Oh, it's because. Okay, Anita, you may speak.
Thank you, Jamie. Anita Schwerner, Stockbridge. So this Saturday, October 18th, is No King's Day. Millions of people will be taking to the streets nationwide to show the power of the people united in peaceful, nonviolent protest. We are holding a rally in Stockbridge from 10 to 11:30 a.m. in front of town offices at 50 Main Street to peacefully demonstrate our commitment to defend our democracy and our constitutional rights and freedoms by standing up and saying America has no king. So I want to thank you, Jamie, and the select board, and Michael Canales, our town administrator, and Police Chief Fenley for approving my request to block off the parking spaces in front of town offices during the rally for the safety and visibility of the demonstrators. So if people are standing at the curb, they don't have to worry about cars coming at them. So I hope you'll all join us on Saturday for a joyous, energizing, peaceful protest. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anita.
You're welcome.
Anyone else have a comment? Seeing none, we will move on. So take action on a one-day alcohol license for wine and malts only for the Berkshire Botanical Garden on November 5th from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. on December 10th from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to grant the license.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Move to authorize town council to file a petition for the town of Stockbridge to intervene as a full participant in the Department of Public Utilities proceeding filed by the Housatonic Waterworks on October 6, 2025, docket number DPU 25-245. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept it.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Motion carries. That brings us to announcements. So I wanted to remind everyone, there's a school vote on November 4th, which is Tuesday, here at Town Hall. There is 2 ballots. There were some informative meetings. Hopefully you were able to attend. Our next meeting will be Thursday, November 6th at 6:30 p.m. There are Halloween activities starting at 4:30 at Heaton Court. It's a trunk or treat. And then a 6 o'clock parade down the street,
What's that date?
the Friday,
The 20th.
24th of October. At 6:30, there are library activities. I believe if it rains, things go indoors, but it won't change the date. And Halloween for trick or treating will be Friday, the 31st. All right. Anyone else have announcements?
What time for trick or treat? Is it 5 to 7?
5 to 7.
Yeah. Any other announcements by the board? Okay. Oh, there's also flu and COVID vaccines at Stockbridge Town Hall on Wednesday, October 22nd, 1:30 to 3:30. There are flyers at Town Hall or probably on our website. All right. Thank you. So a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you,
everybody.
everyone.